Cool. So thank you all for coming. Boston's looking pretty great. So often in our field, we say, well, I can just do X because someone else will come and fix it, right? Well, yes and no. Yes and no, because we know for a fact that we are charged with ensuring that the systems that we are creating do not negatively affect people. So let's talk about information flow. So we know that information flows in systems, and we heard from Margot earlier today that sometimes in the systems of information, there can be barriers to how people, users, other systems accept that information. And if that information is flawed, you're leading that person, that system, to make usually the wrong decisions because they don't have accurate information. We also heard from Alexandra that information can sometimes be compartmentalized, especially in government, and I am going to be talking about government. And it is up to us as designers, writers, information architects to take a deliberate and thoughtful approach to ensure that we can remove the barriers that exist in between these systems at every single decision point so that these systems deliver to the benefits to people and other systems that they are actually intended to deliver in order to actually be able to benefit them. So we've all seen this. You have UX, you have UI, you have IA. None of this matters. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you are a product manager, whether you are a writer, whether you're a content strategist, a designer, an information architect. Every single one of them, every single one of us holds the mantle for what is right. And we should all feel empowered to take a stance and to do the right thing. So I claim that information is structured in three primary pillars. We have collection with very small type, we have management, and we have presentation. The collection of information is just that. How do we get information from people, from systems, from things, into a medium that then we can do things with it, which leads us to management. How do we take information that exists in a system and manipulate it, form it in some way, shape, or form that it can be digested, which leads us to presentation. How do we push that information out so that a system, a person, anything can take that information and make decisions? So let's look at three examples. The first one deals with information, with capturing of information, and we're going to talk about immigration. Between 2010 and 2014, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services naturalized over 3.5 million people, more than 700,000 people per year, which is great because regardless of the fact that USCIS has recently removed Nation of Immigrants from their mission, guess what? We are a nation of immigrants. So those numbers have been attained regardless of the fact that in order to be able to complete the form, you need to read through 8 different documents, each one about 8 to 10 pages of complete jargon, straight up bullshit. You do not have one single source of truth for what it is that you actually need to do. If you want the definition for what something says in the form, you have to go to a different document. And sometimes one document refers to another. But it's easier to illustrate it. So this beautiful stop-and-go flow is what helps naturalized citizens determine if they are eligible to apply to become naturalized citizens. This is garbage. If you do this type of things, you should probably consider not doing them. Primarily because at the end of this 8 pages, when the user answers everything, it usually has a reference that says, go back to page 2. There is no simple answer to whether you may or may not be eligible to become a naturalized citizen. So we talked to users, we designed, we did things, and we came up with a flow that is meant to be a little bit more humane, to actually give the user an answer, to try to make sense out of what is a lot of legal terms. And this is not hard. We see this on almost every single system that we use today. However, this is new to government. Governments, unfortunately, are like the biggest providers of services. So when this comes into government, this is a huge thing. When you're saying that you're taking information and no longer making it a burden on users to be able to complete it and giving them something that actually works, that is a huge thing. Especially when you go into the actual form itself, which is 21 pages, 9-point type, Times New Roman. It is fantastic. Dana also worked on this. And the biggest problem with this is that over time, a group of people, a group of someone erected a barrier to what was actually necessary for people to complete the form and apply to become naturalized citizens. Someone said, oh, completing the form is actually a test. If you want to be a naturalized citizen, you must accurately complete the form. Well, guess what? Nowhere in the law does it actually say that this form is a test. So that is plain wrong. And it is up to us to stand up and be like, actually, no, let's change this. So, this is I guess it was supposed to scroll behind me. Anyways, 21 pages. It is fantastic. And that leads me to what we did. We created a very simple form that actually saved information as you were going. Again, nothing new for government. It is meant to provide users with what they need, when they need it, how they need it. It is meant to lessen the barrier that exists, and it is meant to be more humane. One thing, before I move on this, imagine that you are a parent and that you have lost a child. You are now applying to become a citizen. The form, the paper form, in 4 places asks you if you have a child, if that child is deceased, and then it asks you again, and then again, and then again. If that is not being cruel, I don't know what the fuck is. So let's talk about information management and how we actually take information that exists in order for that information to be consumed, in order for that information to be usable. So I spent some time in government, and one of the things that I got the opportunity to do was to go to Afghanistan to work with personnel working with NATO, with the United Nations, to figure out what was the problem that they were having, that there was no continuity from one person to the other, to the other, to the other, where it seemed that every single person that came in was like, yep, doing it again, doing it from scratch. Well, we realized very quickly that the problem was centralized on a system. That system was very complex to use. That system was based on SharePoint. That system is what technically we call garbage. You log in, tells you, welcome to ANET. Over time, they just started slapping everything that was necessary in here. So the whole point of this thing is for users to be able to write reports, read reports, understand what is going on, have continuity, you can no longer find this. In 2007, the interface was very different. It was doing what it was supposed to do. Over time, it became unusable. The importance on this cannot be understated. After we normalized all of the data, after we created a clear archive of information and figured out what were the needs of the users, what were the intent of users coming into here, when we figured out that, well, maybe a search should not have everything set to exclude by default so that you don't get a null search result, and instead be inclusive unless if you start adding parameters, and we started deploying small features, we started to see results. One of those alleged, gotta tread carefully, especially in the light of what Alexander said, an alleged result of the work that was done was that NATO now had visibility and understanding of what had happened over time with any one specific mission. It was allegedly found that a person had been given over $10 million in about 4 years to do specific projects. That person had been jumping from department to department to department, but because no one had visibility, no one knew that that was happening. Allegedly, there have been more things that have happened that have helped the mission be better. And now let's talk about information presentation. In 2012, well, in 2008, our whole financial system crashed. Pretty positive that everyone here is aware of that. It primarily crashed because of the bad financial products that were out there, or subprime mortgages, which are less than ideal ones. And that happened primarily because people didn't have access to information. When people were trying to purchase a mortgage in order to get a house, they had to rely on the banks, they had to rely on mortgage lenders, they had to rely on mortgage brokers to tell them, well, this is the truth. And the truth varied wildly. You would go into one bank and they would tell you, oh, yeah, the rate right now is 5.0, and you just have to put a down payment of X, and then that's it. Here you go. All of a sudden, you were marred with a financial product that was destined to fail because you could not afford it, but you did not understand how that affected you. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, within its legal framework, was able to collect information from all of the banks, but most importantly from other parts of the government, so Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And they were able to take that information and present it in a way that gave everything that was necessary from a single point of truth to the user, so that users could now make informed decisions. Again, pointing to what Margot said. If you provide users with the information that is necessary for them to be able to make decisions, chances are they're going to make the right decision for them. You will never be able to stop someone from making the wrong decision, but you will definitely lessen the blow to someone's life if you're able to provide the right information so that they can at least make an informed decision, regardless of whether that decision ends up being the wrong one. And what ended up happening with what the CFPB did was that we created a very simple tool that allowed anyone to look at the rates that were being reported. Now, there's no mortgage broker, no lender that can tell you, oh, the rates are X, Y, or Z, knowing that you have no way to access that information. because from the government perspective, this is information that users need, that the public needs. So you're able to query the information. You're able to actually say, well, this is not accurate. So I actually do not want to work with you. I'm going to find someone else to work with. The information that you're giving me is not accurate. I do not accept what you're giving me, and I'm going to make other decisions. If a simple tool like this is the difference between another financial markets meltdown or not, this is like a very clear thing to continue doing. So imagine that this is all information in the middle, and that you're trying to get to point A. You can go any which way. But as designers, as information architects, as decision makers, we can influence how the user gets from where they are to that single source of truth, to the information that is actually necessary for them to be able to make decisions. So it is actually your job, it is our job to ensure that users can navigate information accurately, timely, and from a standpoint of being honest with our users. It is our job to hold the line on that which is true. And the reason for that is that there's no one else coming. It is up to you. It doesn't matter who else is in the room. If they are saying something that is not accurate, it is your job to stand up and say, actually, let's talk about this. This is not right. Let's talk to users. Let's review our research. Because as designers, we are the ones that are closest to users. We are the ones that usually have that breadth of information that helps us make decisions. And the farther you get from the users, usually the more wrong that the decisions that you make are. So not only do we need to take a stance to help users make the right decisions, but we also need to help our teams understand what we know, understand who our users are, and understand what they need. Because if you don't, we have failed. And failure, to be cliche, is not an option. Not today. Thank you. Questions? Comments?
Anybody? Questions? Oh, there's a question.
How are you doing?
My question is, can you tell us a little bit about the underlying technical architecture in terms of the database management systems and that kind of thing that this is built on?
Which of this?
Actually, the last one was pretty interesting.
So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau?
Yep.
Yes. So for those that didn't hear, the question is, can I speak a little bit about the technical architecture and the database management system as to how the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that tool, the Owning a Home tool, worked. So the answer is, I will try. So the front end is Node with a bunch of other stuff. The back end is actually MongoDB. There are about 60 tables, at least as of 2014, that held all of the data. And basically every morning, now every night, there's a 24-hour delay in between when the information gets populated from what is received. Every day, every single financial institution that meets X size by law needs to provide that information to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. There's a pipeline that is established. Definitely not familiar with how that pipeline works. But that information is dumped by the financial services. There are services that are running at the back-end level that do batch jobs and take all of that data that is coming in. They normalize it and then basically dump it into the tables. Then there are some other services that take that, cache the data in order to ensure that the data is always available instead of always hitting the database, and then bring it to the front end. More or less something along those lines.
Thank you. First of all, that was really great. I enjoyed your talk. Question for you would be, what are some of the biggest hurdles or challenges you've had, implementing user-friendly design within the government space?
This question was definitely not a plant, but it is my favorite question to answer. So one of the biggest challenges that I found to implementing user-centered design, human-centered design in the government has been people. Technology, believe it or not, is extremely easy. People are very, very difficult. We spent a lot of time doing co-design exercises, doing workshops. We took the time to actually learn about people, not just our users, but who we were working with. We sat with them. We ate with them. We worked together with them. The goal was to be seen as a partner rather than as an outsider. Once we had gained their trust, and once we started basically working together on coming up with prioritization lists and product features lists, and actually taking them with us to talk to users, things started changing. Because I posit that people are usually reticent to do anything user-centered when they see it as, oh, that's that guy again with the crazy hair and the tattoos that's trying to tell me to do things. But once I sat down with them, once I knew that they're like, oh, they drink an espresso in the morning, and I would show up in the morning and be like, hey, I got you an espresso. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, wait, okay. I can get used to this. And when I said, like, hey, I'm about to go talk to some users. Do you want to come with me? And they're like, sure. And I was like, well, what do you think? Do you have any questions? All of a sudden, I'm making them part of that solution framework and helping them understand that they are a part of this just change things greatly. And that's primarily how in the government we have managed to basically introduce human-centered design work. And it is such that today we're seeing a movement within government, primarily in the procurement sector, where almost a third of the procurements that are coming out are saying, oh, you need to do agile work. You need to have designers. You need to integrate with the team. You need to do user research. Chances are that the procurement officers don't know what it means, but there are program officers that are telling those procurement officers, like, hey, we need this type of things. And for that to be happening in government, it's huge. Yeah. Sorry.
So on that user interface that you showed that got bad over time, it didn't start that way, but it ended up being a dumping ground for a lot of different documents. How would you recommend approaching design or projects where we're only involved for a short amount of time and then it takes on a life of its own?
That is a fantastic question, and that is exactly what we did here. Every single icon on this screen is for a different system. what we understood, even though the label was all-encompassing, was that there was this area about the advisor network that was actually for report writing and report consuming and to understand trends. It did not work that way. There was not one trend line anywhere to be found. Writing reports was a nightmare. I remember a guy that we interviewed who had been in Afghanistan now for about 18 months. This was his third time overseas. He's from Texas, absolutely adorable guy. And he told us that when he's writing reports, he makes sure that he has had lunch and that he has gone to the bathroom because he is scared to death of starting a report and not being able to finish it. Because in the 18 months that he had had that job, he had not once been able to start writing a report, walk away, come back, and continue writing that report because the system failed him. So as we continued interviewing people, we understood that one thing that we could do, we had 6 months to deliver. One thing that we could do was focus on how to improve how users write these reports, how to improve how the command consumes those reports, and how that information is then disseminated. So collection, management, and presentation. We ensured that, oh, this is a funny one. That system required a 3-day training once you got in country into Afghanistan to learn how to use the system, because that's where we are today. And one thing that we did was, as we started designing things and as we started testing, we deployed Hopscotch, which is a Tor JavaScript system. It basically gives you a little bubble, you click on it, then it takes you to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. So we use that, even though it's not meant to do that, but we used it as just-in-time training, so that when someone had a question about like, oh, what do you mean about ministry? What is the goal here? They could just click on it, and all of a sudden, it gave them that information. So empowering the users to have the answers that they need when they need it. But most importantly, we implemented autosave. I know, 2017. Life is fucking wonderful. We implemented autosave, and to this day, my former coworkers receive emails from people in Afghanistan that say, "You have changed our lives." Like, I can go to the bathroom. It is amazing. But to the alleged piece that I spoke about, we made the information relevant enough that the command could actually understand what was happening. We actually developed trend lines, and we developed visualizations for information so that commands could understand what actually was happening over time. So when they allegedly discovered that someone had allegedly taken them for a $10 million ride, that was big, because it was the first time in the 16 years that we have been in Afghanistan that we knew what was happening with the money that was being used, with the money that was being presented, and why things were not happening. And long-winded answer to say, you should always find that which is the most critical, that affects the most people, and that is the smallest. You always want to ensure that you can close on a win, especially with a program like this, which they did not want us there. They had no interest in talking to us, and because of my past experience, having been in the military, we were able to leverage that to get people to at least talk to us, but it was a huge challenge. And once we actually delivered, we went from being the outsiders, those darn kids, to being trusted partners, to the point that the team today continues to work with NATO, continues to work at the Department of Defense, deploying and helping real users. The end.
Give it up. Give it up.